Thank you all for being here this morning and for watching us as we improvise the day. So thank you so much. This is day 2 of the People's Storytelling Festival. We are the New Orleans Solidarity Storytellers. We started out in 2023. There was a call by international groups around running the Gaza monologue, so if anybody remembers that time, it was at the end of November 2023. Feels so long ago, but it's not, but also was. And we kind of wanted to continue outside of that space, but have moments where we come together in spaces like this, where it's not necessarily a space of direct protest, if you will, or direct resistance, but more so a place in between, a place to sit and ground ourselves with the work that we do. And it's beyond poets and it's beyond writers, but it's all kinds of art. So we're always open to expand this more than what it is. And that's why it's called the People's Storytelling Festival and not the People's Poetry Festival or the People's Writers Festival. And we're so excited to kick off day 2 with this panel of incredible people. The panel is titled Poetics of Resistance. And initially when we were thinking about this, we were thinking about that's because Akilah took it off of Do Not Disturb. Well, is it bothering anybody other than me?
I feel like she's very
sorry.
The way you were asking, anyway, let's sit on 5 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you all for bearing. But initially when we were thinking about this panel discussion, it was sort of thinking about the ways art is a form of resistance. So we always hear it and it always feels very cliche, but what does that mean? And what does that mean in reality and in practicality and in the moment that we are in, which is a very chaotic moment. And so, first of all, I would like the, sorry, that was okay. First of all, I want the panelists to go through and introduce themselves. And so, I'll pass the mic around and then we'll go from there.
Heyo, my name is FreeQuency, pronouns are free. You could also just call me Free, and I'm here today with the New Orleans Solidarity Storytellers, and Hasheema just gave y'all our history, so I will have a very short introduction.
Hey y'all, my name is Anisha. I use she, they pronouns. I'm here with NOLA Musicians for Palestine. We have 3 projects. We have a brass band called Hamilton Brass Band, Musician Solidarity Network, and Crew of Zaytun. And all of these employ different modes of storytelling, not super different. We've existed for the past 2 years. We started back in 2024, January 6th, that first day of Carnival. We took the Joan of Arc route before they rolled with a parade that was really co-created by community. We had the band that we put together, but so many people showed up with art, and we paraded to keep a spirit of solidarity with Palestine while the city was gearing up for Carnival, and while city officials were getting ready for the touristry of it all, and the ignorance and detachment from the world of it all that has crept into Carnival.
What's up, everybody? I'm Spy Boy Walter Sanders III. I'm a black masculine, Mardi Gras Indian, New Orleans Indian. However you want to put it, is no disrespect to me. Born and raised in New Orleans traditions, and I'm just extremely grateful to be in this circle with everyone today. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Avery. I use they, she, and he pronouns. I'm the editor at Mangrove magazine, which we'll talk about a little bit. And I also am a writer, a poet, an aspiring screenplay a dancer, you know, a multidisciplinary artist. But yeah, I'm just really grateful to be on this panel with so many lovely people. Thank you.
Sisa Pixipura Buke. I am a Kichwa Ottawa Indigenous woman living here in Bulbancha. I am part of the Bulbancha Liberation Radio project, and we are a radio project that started after Hurricane Ida in 2021 and has been bringing indigenous stories and music and news and projects to this territory in a radio format. So I'm excited to talk more about it and more about my own experiences as an indigenous woman trying to find that connection with other relatives whenever I move in my own territory. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Hasheema. I didn't say that at the beginning. But as you all can see, that there is a variety of groups here. We're just gonna yell today. So we have a variety of groups and a variety of different modes of storytelling that's happening, and I want to ask the first question, which is, how does your group define and engage with creative-based resistance? What does that mean to you and the mode that you work with?
I like that you looked over here. Yeah, I can go. Well, with Mangrove Magazine, we actually started originally as an organization called the Healing Underground that did work across the country with a lot of different abolitionist campaigns, so like Stop Cop City and a few other, like Stop Line 3, etc. And we did different like workshops, in-person events, basically trying to get people to understand abolition through an arts lens, but also through a direct action lens. And so being born out of that, really what Mangrove Magazine is now is a digital and like print publication that is meant to connect abolitionists who are artists and who are values aligned across the globe, but mostly like focusing on Turtle Island, together through like dialogue and education and essentially world building and future creating. And so that's really what we're trying to do, is be able to pay artists and be like someone who does set that standard of paying artists for their contributions, being people who are able to just make a form that is both physical and off of social media, because that is something that we're kind of wanting to move more towards. And yeah, we're like engaging in a way of being kind of a time capsule at the same time. You know, every single time you print something, it really is kind of a capturing of that moment. And so that's in a nutshell kind of what we do to make it so that we have like a physical remembering of the time and place in which we're all organizing. And it's just a small snapshot, but it's to be like, we are here, we have been doing this. And to kind of, you know, continue the line of, just like the line of passing on stories and passing on art and like passing on the future we want and making it true by doing so.
A lot of what you said resonated with me, and I feel like the things that we're trying to do with NOLA Musicians for Palestine as well. I just remembered mid-sentence that I need to speak loud. Try that now. I forgot to mention I'm the chant leader and song leader of 100 Investment, so hopefully this isn't a challenge for me. I just gotta remember. Yeah, NOLA Musicians for Palestine formed like very specifically after October 7th, 2023, which was when the ongoing genocide in Palestine by Israel, and I say ongoing because it's a decades-long history of colonization, centuries long if you extend beyond Israel's existence. We formed in direct response to that escalation of the genocide after October 7th. And one thing that we do, that we started with, is playing Arabic and Palestinian music set to traditional or recognizable brass band instrumentation, recognizable within the context of New Orleans especially. And we play the music not just to perform it for people, or not simply for it to be entertainment, not simply for it to be music that speaks on its own, but to be intentional about why we're playing this music. That's one of the reasons that we include chants in our songs, why we include the historical context of our songs, because we think it's important that artists make clear the political landscape that they are living in currently, that they're creating in currently, and that is informed by the history that has brought us here. And in terms of NOLA Musicians for Palestine and the music we're playing, that's a history of Western colonization, ongoing occupation, apartheid, genocide, and establishing that clearly is part of what we are doing, and inviting people to then not just listen to the music, but learn more about the context that the music is arising in. I really liked what you said about creating a snapshot. To me, that's one of the reasons I really value that we had an opportunity to create an album from the repertoire that we've been playing over our 2 years of existing at the time that we were recording the album, for about 2 years. I see it as a snapshot too. Like, this is the moment we were in. These are the songs we were playing. These are the chants we were doing, and with chants particularly, I see those as small bits of storytelling. It's not like the perfect message. It doesn't encapsulate everything we want to say, but it invites people to think about what we're saying and think about that chant and take it home and mull through it more and contextualize it within the world that we're living in right now.
There's this Bell Hooks quote that she says, "The point is not to render ideas less complex, but to make the complex clear." And I think, just based on what you were saying, for me that's so much what art is about. And for us as solidarity storytellers, one of the things that we're trying to make clear is that solidarity isn't about seeing someone else going through something and feeling bad about it on their behalf. It's about being able to look and see how their conditions are tied to, connected, and linked to, and oftentimes reflect your own internal conditions, especially as people who are here located in the belly of a beast of America. There's this tendency to talk about the world as if it's this thing that exists out there, and as if we are not a part of the world. And we live in New Orleans, which is a very global city, and one that if you look at how we talk about the tragedies that have happened around the world is actually more story-wise located in the global south than it is in the global north. And so we think it was very important for us, after we had that initial call with the Gaza monologues, one of the things that we heard back from our community was we need more spaces for revitalization, right? This is not a one-off struggle, this is not a one-off fight, and there's so much that's being asked from all of us in all of these different directions, but we're in a place that we are coming together to revitalize ourselves, to connect, to understand that like, this is worth it, right? Not just some abstract like protest where there's thousands of people, which to be clear, I've helped organize those too, and they also have their place, but where is the place that we're able to talk to people and make clear to them what it is that we're doing in a way that also feels inviting to them. And it reminds me of that Toni Cade Bombardo quote where she says, the job of I'm definitely misquoting this, but the job of like oppressed writers from oppressed groups is to make the revolution irresistible. Right? And I look at the different groups on here, especially the Masking Indians, and I was just out on Super Sunday, and I remember just being so drawn to it and being like, I want to burn all this shit down. And this is making me feel possible because we're out here conjuring this creative energy of resistance and doing it in a way that makes people, again, want to show up, not feel overwhelmed by the complexities of what's going on, but to be clear about what their positionality and place is in order to be like a wrench in the system. So for us as solidarity storytellers, we are really here to be like, what are the stories that need to be told in order for us to be clear that we're actually authoring a collective story, and we have different ways to contribute to that. And then you said something earlier, Avery, about abolition through art, and something about art versus direct action, and it made me think that a lot of us are actually using art as a form of direct action, not in opposition to it, but saying that there's a place that creative conjuring plays in the dismantling of this system, but also in the creation of what it is that we want afterwards and otherwise that also has to happen simultaneously.
Could you repeat the question for me one more time?
Yeah, so it was, how does your group work with and engage with creative-based resistance?
Yeah, so I mean, my group, honestly, the foundation to who we are, what we do is from resisting. We still maintain the tradition of beading, using beadwork and featherwork to show our resistance as a creative way to speak out to our community, because what we do is literally community-based, period. When we reveal and when we have conversations with the things that we sow, is to give thanks to the people on the front lines who didn't know us, but they knew it was going to be another generations of people coming after. So, I mean, we use anything that we can put our hands on to say something in the form of art. I think we just lucky enough to be here in New Orleans, previously known as Balbancha, where we can do these things without needing a permit. We don't need a permit to be on the streets. So anything that we feel within our spirit, within our heart, we can bring it to life and then get it to the community directly without having to have any permission. Like, we don't need permission. And we like to tell others, like, take the word, don't even worry about the word permission, just do it. You know what I mean? Cancel permission in your vocabulary enough to be able to feel free, to explore the present, the past, and what the future look like. So yeah, like, our foundation is like resistance. Like, when you see masking Indians, you just think resisting. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we go on similar paths of that, as Native people and Indigenous people,
You spoke up just a little bit.
okay. I think our foundation as Native people also goes on the same lines as that. I'll speak louder. And I think as Native people, our grandpas, our grandfathers, our ancestors have been the stewards of different territories and different lands across the globe. And so it is being important for us to also resist through different ways, especially I think for us, the orality of storytelling is the most important part, because our knowledges were transferred from generation to generation in an oral form. And I was in academia for a while, and in academia, as an Indigenous woman, having to use the writing language was complicated, because I realized that my brain works more in the oral sense, because that's how I learned through my grandma, through the ancestors. That's how the knowledge was passed down. And so I think that's why the radio has been so impactful, especially for organizing in Native communities. And historically, when we think about Indigenous communities, like, the radio has played a main, a main tool in how, one, they mobilized, when they were organized in the 60s. And there's examples of Native communities like all across Akilah, or like what is now Latin America. And I think that's why the radio is important, because it brings that orality of Native pass down of knowledge into a context where I think the written language has taken over and has been validated more, especially when we think about academic spaces. That's why I think for us it's important to uplift the orality of the knowledge that we bring to it, and what it means for communities to organize. And for us in Bulbancha Liberation Radio, it has meant that through the radio we can explore, we can show from like news of what's happening here in Bulbancha to stories about medicinal herbs and plants, or storytelling about intergenerational healing or intergenerational traumas, and to bring that in that format means that somehow we are bringing the ways of teaching and the ways of sharing knowledge from our ancestors to this formatting that reproduces that.
I really love that point, and I think it's so, like, I just came out with a book, and and I'm a spoken word artist for a reason, right? And we engage when we're doing solidarity storytellers, like, no hate whatsoever on people who are publishing, but we were very clear that we wanted to engage with the oral tradition because it has a very specific way of connecting with certain people. And I think you're right, there's a way that the written word has been legitimized, even in the literary world, right? As spoken word artists, we often get like put to the side because we're not real writers. But again, back to the idea of why we're doing the storytelling festival versus a writing festival, there's something ancient about stories being passed down and the inability for oppression to capture those stories when they're passed in this way, when they're passed through an energy transference rather than in a material form that someone can take and burn this book, but they can't burn that exchange that happened between your elders and then you with the people who come after you. And I do think of when in my times in academia, how they do demonize the oral tradition and say it's not a legitimate source, you know, it's because we can't go back and say this person said it when, but it's like, well, if I said my grandma said it, she said it, like, and we have to have that cultural trust also. So it's an entirely different way of looking at who and how stories are legitimized, and that is calling us to re-indigenization because so many of us came from an oral tradition originally.
Yeah, I think when you I think what's big when you speak about the trust. I think the reason why that the lore that is passed on to us, the stories that's passed on to us is powerful because we trust our teachers. You know, we know that the men, the women, or whoever is speaking to us, it means us well and want us to hold these memories that they have close to the way that we live to help us navigate through the daily life. And so yeah, that was powerful that I grabbed from that. You know, trust your teacher. You know, trust your teacher.
Yeah, I think, you know, this idea of in academia, one of the things that spoke to me right now was this whole idea of how it really isn't valued as much as oral storytelling, and even in any sort of research, it's kind of like tacked on. Like, let's do these interviews and tack them on, and you know, say these couple of people corroborated what we've gotten through the numbers and through the surveys and through all of that. And it's not, and when it stands alone, it's like, but did you look at this? But did you do that? But did you get this survey for 100,000 people? And the world, you know, doesn't work that way. But some of the things that were coming up was this idea of world building. I think those were your words, Avery, and what we are passing on to the future. But then you all also kind of went into tradition. You started talking about tradition and what what your practices are rooted in. NOLA Musicians for Palestine, you guys, I mean, I never thought in my life I would hear the tunes that I heard in Palestine playing out here in the streets, and it's unfortunate that the circumstances that brought them here. But it's still, I recognize that as somebody who is Palestinian, just this deep tradition, these songs that I would hear my uncle play when I was a little kid on the radio. He'd turn on the radio and Fedus would be playing, or Uncle would be playing, and I'd be like, this is so boring, bro, turn it on. And, you know, as a child, and then when you grow up and you're like, there's something, I get it now. I get why my uncle would turn this on and listen to it on the drive to work, like he'd drop us off and play the music. And it was just, and it's become this part of our family, and something that me and my siblings reflect on. I like remember when our uncle used to do that. He'd like take us on a 40-minute. He'd take the scenic route. I don't drive, but when I was driving, my friends would always comment on, "Oh, Hasheema, you could literally take I-10 and drop us off in like 10 minutes. Why can't you take the 45?" And I didn't recognize it was so tied to that. And until recently, I was like, I get it. I get it. But I want to hear more. I want to hear more from you all elaborating on this like idea of traditions. What traditions and what practices are you bringing into? Some of you already spoke to that, but I'd love to hear more of that and where tradition lies in the work that you do.
Yeah, I would say for my tribe and just overall the masculine culture, tradition lies within the understanding of what happened here in this land, and how do we learn to live from this land? How do we learn to navigate and ultimately fight against oppression here in this land? Tradition lie in that the way that we be, the way that we sow, the chants that we chant, is all giving thanks to the indigenous folks of this land, and then also the African folks that was brave enough to fight against enslavement, the Haitians that fought against enslavement here, and then also the other traditions and people that came through that pretty brown river. We just, we still highlight what happened to us through the beadwork, through the designs, through the dance. We still highlight these things and make them relevant so that they're not forgotten. That way we don't forget who we are, where we come from. I mean, I feel like oppressors did a great job at taking a lot of our memory away, a lot of our culture away. So what we do have today, we still serious about it and passing that down through the stories. You can't get a true understanding of what it means to be a masculine Indian at school, on YouTube, through a book. You literally have to sit with an elder, someone who's been doing it, who's been living it, to truly understand it. And then you have to embody it. You have to understand the mannerisms of a spy boy and why he lean lower when he dance, rather than the chief when he sit up a little higher and he tapping his feet when he dance. You have to learn the mannerisms of why you get down on one knee on the floor working on a crown rather than on a table. You know all the details about it, but the only way is to be able to sit under elders, men and women who came before, to now I'm embodying what it means to be a spy boy. And I understand what it means to yell how I yell and call out my name and my tribe and have pride behind it. So I mean, the tradition for us is to learn and give back to the community, but also for the ones who can participate, make them serious about it. Forcing it on them, in a sense, like respectfully, but like my children, they wake up to me playing the tambourine, singing Indian songs, talking about, who we are as people. And I'm forcing it on them in case they do be inspired by other worldly things. They'll always know who they are and always have that tie to tie in with who they are, also tie it into what they're inspired by elsewhere in the world. So anytime you see the kids participating, we know that, the traditions of masculine is continuing to be passed on.
Well, I can speak I already kind of spoke on that, on the morality, but I also think that the idea of using radio as a way to give ourselves a voice also comes from a place where we have not had those spaces in the media, and most people spoke on our behalf a lot of times. And also, historically, our identities as Native people have been trying to be erased in order to legitimize our taking our land, because we're not here, and we're not present, and we're something from the past. And so, and that legitimizes taking our territories and taking our land. And I think when we think about indigenous stories or indigenous history, and I've noticed a difference coming from the south. I'm from what is now known as Ecuador. So I grew up in the Andes. I was born and raised in the Andes. And I've traveled to the north to what is now known as Canada, and then I came to what is so-called now the United States. And throughout all those travels and meeting with other indigenous communities and like creating kinship with other relatives, I found how it is this history of trying to raise us because we, as in a way of remembering the Native people that were in the past, but they are gone by now, you know, as we are in the, we disappeared. And because of that, our identities have been used like in media and TV for like certain movies or like speaking in our behalf in a lot of different ways. And so I think the power of using like the orality that I just talked to in a medium that can give us a space to say our own stories and to use our own voice. And not let other people to tell who we are and why we're here and why we're still here and why our languages are still are in danger, but they're still here and they're still present. I think it's very important and it's very crucial, and it brings that thing of two concepts what is like modernity and tradition. And so I think in a lot of ways has been seen as Native people need to keep and keep being the same as they were, as we were like 100 years ago. I think we're now going to change with the transition of what is happening with the external factors. And whenever we embrace modernity, then we stop being indigenous. And that's something that has happened a lot in like political discourses and academic discourses. And I think it is important in the way that I see things that we can have both and they can both walk together. And that's what the radio, the Bulbancha Liberation Radio is doing, and the SWAMNet project is doing. It's like using that idea of modernity through technology, the radio technology of them, communications technology with the oral traditions that we already carry, and walk side by side without having to leave something to embrace the other one, but we can actually have both. And I think that's the most important part for us to know that we can carry those stories, we can carry that teachings from the elders, and at the same time we can embrace all the technology, we can embrace all these spaces as well. And that's gonna actually push and lift our voices.
Yeah, connecting on that point, I really relate to the future making, which is like bringing our traditions with us into the present, into with our children, you know, in the future. And I feel like for me, I'm also a Native person of Lipan Apache and NOLA descent, and I feel like with my favorite part about doing the magazine and the publication and like writing in general is like the ability to connect with people, because all of the time I don't make people write stuff with me. I just like listen and then I transcribe it and I take that time to sit and have those conversations. But really like what is going on is a lot of personal and relationship exchange and like relationship building, and that's actually at like the crux of what I've done in organizing. Before I even thought of myself as like an artist or a poet or anything like that, I really was like, I am somebody who wants to dedicate my life to the things that I believe in, which is like Black and Indigenous liberation, very like obviously. And so I think through working within like this magazine and this mode, before that I was in like really events, very in-person programming, like wanting to only really be with people, my people, but then also like other communities who we are really aligned with. And through that we were like, okay, we want to have a way to connect us and to connect our stories, but also to like connect the ways that we make visual art. Like a lot of the magazine is like about visual art as well. And it does have like poetry and interviews and whatnot, but a thing that I'm so proud of is like the people who like submit, and then we get to talk and have discussions about like why are they making this art? Why is it important to them? Like, do they want to be connected with other artists like from around the country? Do they want to like where do they want it to go? And so I think it is that tradition of just like reaching out and getting to know people's stories and being able to like weave us all together that I pull from. Like, I mean, my grandmother who raised me is very much a chismosa, like very much like she knows everybody, she talks to everybody, she has all the stories, she has all the tea, she knows everything. It's like very collected, right? And it's, in some ways, you know, it's so silly, it's not like always very serious, it's not always intense, but it's like we have, like you were saying, like with your uncle who in the car like just would like take the scenic route and make you listen to this shit and you're like, please don't do this, like I need to go home, I'm tired. But I feel really similarly, and that like, it's the tradition of being like, okay, I'm going to like tell you all of these things, I'm gonna sit down and have this like a long conversation with you, sit down, hear the music that you want to, sit down like and hear your story and like, you know, go through like the love, which is as an editor, I think that there is so much love in it because so many editors, I think, see it as like this opportunity to like carve what they want out of a story into like from what people said, right? Which isn't really like a capturing of what people are actually saying. But as an editor, I really try to be like, no, I want us to collaborate on how this can feel like it has your essence, like it is best telling your story. And to kind of like, yeah, I think just as like oral tradition is incredibly important, that interpersonal connection, I think too it's being like bringing it into the future. Like we are also, you know, as an independent publication, we are really like, we're not depending on money, we don't sell things. Like we pay our artists, we try to make sure that it's like, you know, very equitable and like loving and thoughtful and considerate of the time and effort that they put. But then to like kind of reclaim these ways of like, of documenting what is going on, because no one, when we're thinking about our stories being put out, there's a long tradition of people who have been doing independent publishing and radical publishing, and I think that that's so beautiful and rich and deep, because without it, like, it can be hard for us to like keep track because of this systematic erasure of our stories and of who we are. And so I feel like through this particular magazine, we're trying to really move forward with being like, how can we make this a collaborative process and a continuous organism that's alive and that connects people and that is like both a capture of the past and also a moment in the present and a gift for the future. You know, so I just feel like it's a lot to hold, and I feel like when I'm listening, especially to you two, like I'm hearing so many things that like to bring into the future with it, like with oral storytelling, like really making it like in the place, and with the physical, like literally being in front of people, like with others, like knowing, practicing embodiment. And I feel like there's just, I don't know, I feel like as a writer and as somebody who does storytelling in a lot of different modes, it just really is so obvious how limitless we are in our ability to tell stories. And so yeah, I have so many different thoughts, but so many different thoughts. But yeah, I think like what I'm hearing from everybody is really like, yeah, the merging of time and the collapsing of time that is really important in storytelling, for me, at least.
Well, I was just gonna say, I'm just sitting here thinking, like we naturally, like just thinking about, you know, storytelling, and I just had a thought like, wait, you have to be a storyteller to participate in masking. Like, you just have to be. Like, when you get out in front of people, you just naturally become a storyteller. Whether you want to or not, like, and it's not just through the artwork, the physical artwork, but like through the verbiage. You know what I mean? Telling who you are, where you from, why you came. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's something I thought about when you was just
Just gonna lower my mask so you can see how much of a cheese in right
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go because you wrote yours down and
I
I'm
wrote
quickly
down.
flipping from my brain.
Get it.
And it's gonna be a series of bullet points, so whatever. But in response to what you're just saying, made me think about this book that I wrote, right? Because I'm thinking a lot about embodiment, right? Like as a poet, as a writer, I'm not like sit at my desk and put my little thoughts on paper. I'm like, oh shit, there's a story that is coming to be told through me, and I am the teller of this story. And I have to also embody this story in a way that it trusts me to take it and deliver it, right? So I started also identifying as a storyteller a couple of years ago versus a poet. I'll get to that in a second. But not just like the storyteller is one word. In this book, there's this symbol, just that straight up and down line instead of the slash, that I try to like talk about like simultaneous occurrences and happenings. So the way that I write storyteller is story, that slash, and teller, because that embodiment is so much a part of it. You have to be able to carry that story, to be that story, to be believable in order to make the story itself believable. And then you also have to be the teller, right? You don't just embody it, you have to be able to communicate it to other people. And I think that's what I love so much about poetry, is it was taught to me. It was not a written form, it was from the oral tradition, and that was a part of the process. It wasn't just about the words, but it was how they were communicated and conveyed to people, and how that process, when we were talking about that energy transference of the oral tradition, was an integral part of the process. Because you're not just transferring the story, but you're transferring all of the things that led to the understanding of the story, and you're taking the time to do that. That was one bullet point. The second bullet point is that I think we live in a time, especially in the last 10 years, we saw a lot of like resistance get captured by the mainstream and the elite, and then get diluted and commodified. So now it's just like entertainment, like, oh, I did a protest, look at my picture on Instagram. Like, but it's like, what was the point of the protest? What was the point of these things, right? And I think about in 2020, like a bunch of people sent me like Amanda Gorman's video at the inauguration. We're like, look, and I was like, is this the tradition you think that I'm coming from of storytelling? Because I haven't then been clear about what it is that I'm doing out here in this world. Because the poetry isn't the tradition. It's what brings us to express it through the poetry. That's the tradition that we're trying to capture. And I asked you to borrow your phone, because there's this poet, this Palestinian writer that I think captures it so well, because like poetry and writing exists, right? Like Dr. Seuss is poetry to some people, right? And I'm not trying to be like, that's bad poetry. Like poetry is, it's not inherently good, bad, political, da 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 da, but it can be weaponized and used in certain ways. And so there's this writer that says, in order to write poetry that isn't political, I must listen to the birds. And in order to hear the birds, the warplanes must be silent. And I think that's the writing tradition that we come from, where we understand that like we as a species like deserve beauty, and we create beauty. It's inherent with us. That's what we do, but right now what we have to use our creative energy for is to create the spaces that allow us to engage in art in that way, because it's not actually accessible to all of us in that form. And the third thought that I have, which is one I've been thinking about the last couple of months, and it's a little dicey, so I'm like, we'll cut this from the recording, but we'll work through it. So a lot of people also hit me up when Renee Good was murdered in Minneapolis, right? And there was this public narrative that came about that was like, this poet has been murdered, poetry is political, and I was like, she was not murdered because of her poetry. And there's a distinction that needs to be made there, because there are poets throughout the history of the world and resistance who have been murdered specifically because of the stories that they chose to share. And it's not to diminish the fact that somebody died, right? But it's to say that there are specific moments where people politicize their work and it turns deadly to them. And that is the tradition of writing that we are coming from. We are intentionally weaponizing our pens and our words and saying, make me a target because I am targeting you.
That didn't feel dicey to me. I do have some thoughts I want to share on the question of like how we incorporate tradition, how our group incorporates tradition.
Totally forgot.
And now part of it too. We're all, everything is so connected in these conversations. Truly, and Free, when you were talking about, when multiple of us have been talking about practicing like embodiment and building that understanding of the tradition to then have like the trust within ourselves, and hopefully the trust from the people who are listening to us to actually carry that tradition forward. I think that that's a part of NOLA Musicians for Palestine that we are trying to build out more. The music that we play, a lot of the time it's, like I was saying before, Palestinian and Arabic music, and a lot of the people in our band, they're not Palestinian. They're not Arab. They don't come from this tradition of music that has its own vocabulary, its own like its own musical scales, its own rhythms. It's, as all musical traditions do, there are so many. Something that we've started doing, trying to do more regularly, is have workshops where we can invite people who are musicians, who play different instruments, to come and learn a bit more about the music theory that the songs that we're playing are based in. And hopefully that's a way that people can not just be like listening to our music passively, but engaging with it in a more active way and really trying to understand the culture that they are listening to, or a facet of the culture that they're listening to. And then the other thought that I had, which is a bit more from like my own personal experience of tradition, I've been thinking about language a lot recently. I am from the Bangladeshi diaspora. Specifically, my parents grew up in Bangladesh, and they both moved here to do like college education studies when they determined for themselves that Bangladesh was not a place that they felt they could have a career because of the history of colonization and genocide and recent independence when they left. So they both came over in like 1985, 1986. They've now been in the US longer than they were ever in Bangladesh. They've now been living in a country where the dominant language is different from the native language that they grew up with. And not only is it different from the native language, this language, English, it's a language that they were learning in the school systems in Bangladesh too. So it's a language that they've been immersed in that is a language of colonization. It is a tool of, it is ultimately used as a tool of separating people from their native languages if we don't clock it as such and if we let it become that. So holding on to language traditions that are from our heritage, from our families before they came here, or before English was forced upon them, I think is really important. One thing that we do in our music is also, there are a lot of the songs that we play, they do have Arabic lyrics. We don't include the lyrics all the time, but there are songs where we'll include the choruses and like I'll sing, or other people will sing. We have a member who is from Egypt, who was here for a time, who would sing some of the songs for us. So I think of language as a tradition and passing language down and holding on to language, and that also is like an act of love and an act of care and an act of preservation, an act of bringing our traditions into the future, a future where we are not homogenized, a future where we don't keep losing languages, a future where we embrace all of the diversity that we still have and all this expansiveness that comes from all these different language traditions. So yeah, those are my two thoughts that I wrote down.
Yeah, and yeah, language is a big part of it, right? And I think of, growing up here before we moved to live in Palestine. My parents never once did they ever, until this day, not once do they speak to us in English. Even if we speak to them in English, they'll always respond in Arabic. There's no English in their vocabulary. They won't try. And I think, and that's why when we moved to Palestine, I was 10 years old. It wasn't hard to get along. You know what I mean? Kind of go about with people, because it's like parents were always speaking it to us, and they sent us to like Sunday school, equivalent of Sunday school, to be with the rest of the Arabs in town. And it's just so important, and everything that you all said about tradition, about grandmothers, and all the things that they've passed on, even the little like tidbits that they have, the gossip. I mean, my great grandma, I was thinking about community and how we show up for one another, and how, now it's become this, let's schedule something 5 months in advance to see somebody that lives 10 minutes away from me. Why? When, my great grandma, like, her friends would just be rolling up. Like, you're there, you're not. Like, bring back the and it would be like a 5-minute, hey, how's it going? Okay, good.
okay, I'm moving on to go see the next person. And that's how we roll.
And that's how CP time was invented.
Yeah.
Shit you not, because you can't get from destination A to B without talking to 74 different people, and that takes time.
And you know, and they kept that sense of community alive. And you know, my great grandma lived till she was 94, and she always had people rolling up in her house, and all the time. And that's how we got to know them, and that's how we heard the stories and the things that I'm able to relay now to like my younger siblings and like other people in my life that I'm like, oh yeah, this one time. And I wish that I had the foresight to be like, I want to record this because this is not going to be forever. You know, when you're a kid, you think like your grandparents are going to live forever. Your great grandparents, they're always going to be around, and that's not the case. And so anyways, so that's a part of it, and that's why it's important to record things. I have a last question for you all before we open it up to the audience. We do have half an hour almost, but I am curious to know what has surprised you about the way arts are being used or have been used, or what's going on in the art scene in the moment, how it's showing up in the moment that we're in.
Mine's very quick. It kind of ties to what I was saying earlier, but the capture of art right now, to remove it from its cultural and traditional base to be a form of entertainment and what's the word? Like no, this is not helpful in any way. These are all good
Flattening.
These are very good words.
From reality. Decontextualization.
Yes, that's what I meant, is all of these things. Thank you for coming to my talk.
I mean, and to what you're saying, I mean, like even just this whole removing art and removing words from people, and now it's being automated by this AI. We're using AI to generate this stuff, and I could go on a whole thing. I'm about to get thrown out of work.
And I think even the removal of art from the people. Like these days, you cannot do art if you're not an artist. And I think that is the biggest thing that we've lost culturally, is that we all used to be creatives. Like that was a contribution that we would all make culturally. And I think very quickly, my mom, we're Kenyan, and so I remember when I was younger trying to reconnect with my culture, being like, tell me, how do I do this? And one day she was just like, you keep asking me these things as if I can like piecemeal tell it to you, but it is a culture. You just do it, you are in it. And that's what I think about art too, is it's like, you're not an artist because you sell a piece of work. You're an artist because you're engaging with this larger spirit of what it means to be assigned to move through this world with a creative understanding and a creative outlook. Because not everybody looks at the world or experiences the world and is compelled to write, or is compelled to paint, or is compelled to make a radio show. Like, there are people who are compelled to do other things, and I think there's something very specific about those of us who end up being artists. Like, we can't not be artists, actually. It's a compulsion for us. So, the thing that I'm most surprised right now is how art has been removed from this energy, this creative source that we're all connected to being this like, this AI, the idea that there's AI artists out there.
Yeah.
All right, that's all.
Yes. Yeah, there was two things that really stuck with me with this question. I feel like, everybody came in. That was really cute. I kind of lost my train of thought. I think there's two things that really surprised me a lot about this moment in terms of like making art and being in art and just like this particular path of creative resistance is really, and I am very optimistic. I am very actually much like, I believe that we have a beautiful future ahead of us for our like children and for who we are, and like that is what I want to focus my time and energy and like, I mean everything I do really on. And when I think about that, like I really recognize like how much of a failure the systems of oppression that exist are, because like even just us having this conversation, all of us in all of the modes that we do as humans, like we are meant to intrinsically create. That is what makes us human. Like that is what at our core, like you were saying, everybody makes something. We all are making, we all are creating. That's like the beautiful thing about being a human. And the state tries to pump money, power, violence, anger, aggression, apathy, sadness, like all of these things into us to ruin that, to like take that from us, right? Because of this like perverse understanding of themselves, right? Where they are so disconnected that they try to put that onto us. And I feel like what a beautiful failure that is, because we are here, because we are doing things. And that doesn't mean that it's like, I'm not trying to glorify or like make it very like optimistic or just like sunshine and whatever. I don't believe in that, but I am like, I think that there is in the near future, there is a beautiful world for all of us. And I think that within that comes like connection, and that is really what creating is like connecting more to ourselves and connecting more to each other and to the land and to like our relationships with everything around us, and like protecting these life-giving systems. And there's all of these things right now, we're at this like crux and point that just feels as if it continues to get sharper and more violent and more intense, and it is still losing, like it is still failing all of the time. No matter how much like bombs, no matter how much like genocide they try to push, it's just like that in and of itself is the most constantly surprising thing, because every single day I meet people who are making beautiful things, like who are making things that make me want to live and that make me want to connect more. So I think that's like my largest takeaway from being involved in such beautiful art practices everywhere and like being around other people who are doing wonderful things is like, that's my biggest surprise. Every day I'm like amazed, inspired, in awe. And that's not because like I'm complicit or like not paying attention, you know? So that's where I'm at.
I just want to build on that a little bit too, or just like my own spin on it, because I think about this a lot too. Yeah, we live where in a system where so much money is pumped into death making. Really, we live in a death making system. So much money is pumped into it. So much energy is pumped into it, and yet people are still out here making a life. People are still out here resisting that system. People are still out here doing what there, like so many people have been convinced to think is not possible or to be apathetic about, but like we're still here and still being like, no, come with us. We'll show you a different way, like we can figure it out together. And all of that exists through the most heinous things that we continue to see every day. And like what you were saying at the end, that it's not that we are not aware of those things, it's because we are intimately aware of those things. And we know that they will not be the end of us simply because we say we will not let it. We will not let those things be the end of us. We will not let those things, those death-making systems rule over us. Because we know there's a different way, and we're committed to coming together around a different way and making life and going towards that future. Even if it's a distant future, I don't care. That's the future that I'm working towards.
Yeah. And bitch, we will still be there.
Yeah.
And we will be there in force.
Yeah.
And like,
and
with
we're,
so
and
many.
we're here in like, there are microcosms of that
Yes.
world already. We're existing in one right now as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Truly.
I could go. I think for me, what has been surprising, and I don't think it's surprising even, but what it has been inspiring is that given the uncertain times we're all living in right now, and as you were mentioning, it feels like violence, everything is escalating in ways that are very scary. And more than anything, the systems we live on are trying to keep us disconnected from one another, from ourselves, from our sense of connection to our relatives, like human and non-human relatives. And what I've seen is in these moments of that type of uncertainty and disconnection, art has been a path for collective care. And I think that for me, that is very inspiring in seeing it, what is, you know, what we're seeing as we were talking about in these, just in like now, like just with you all, with the project, what has been seen on the streets with no permission to exist on the streets and taking over that without asking permission and taking it from here and seeing what I see at home with my community when they have uprisings over the past few months, and seeing the huge murals on the highways, but also seeing people sitting on fires in the middle of the protest and then sharing stories and all of that is so inspiring to see that in the midst of fighting the system that's keeping us disconnected, we're trying to find ways through music, through poetry, through visual arts, through storytelling to be connected to one another and to care for one another and to heal together. And I think that was for me the most inspiring thing, and it's not surprising because I think that it is powerful that we get together when things are really tough and uncertain, but it is very powerful to know, as you said, that we will continue to be here, and we are fighting to be here and for our generations to be here and have a world where we can be connected to one another and are being as the center of it. And creativity being like feeding and nurturing those seeds that the people before us planted and we're nurturing as well.
I think for me was most surprising in art today in my situation is that for so long we had to hide what we do and who we are, to now people all over the world is coming to New Orleans to see the black masking, Mardi Gras Indians, New Orleans Indians, like they coming to see what we do and want to know why we do what we do. And for the longest we had to keep our culture, our traditions a secret to keep from being taken away and used against us. And even in the recent years of me growing up, I'm 30 now, but like, that's very young compared to my culture, but it's like, growing up, we wasn't calling ourselves artists. This just who we were. Like, this just was our life. And then, as opportunities came about for us to travel and explore, then we realized, wait, we are artists. And now, we're able to tour the world through the beating, through the singing of songs, but it's just surprising, and it's so surprising that, because I think like, why my culture? Why the masking Indians? What we do that's so fascinating? I know what we do that is so powerful and fascinating, but why the world want to know about this? What is it that this culture doing to other spirit that's pulling them here, want to create documentaries? Like we just had a 60-minute thing that came here, like want to know more about the masking culture, but it's like, so I often think like, okay, how can we give back but maintain the thoroughness and all the pulp that it takes to continue to be significant? Basically how to not go commercial. You know what I mean?
Visibility is a double-edged sword.
And it's scary, but I do think it's power in having meetings like this, smaller circles, in exchanging perspective so we can maintain our culture, maintain our traditions within it. So that's really what surprised me, is that the world, literally, people travel from all over the world to come, and there's so many documentaries, so many YouTube videos made. They want to know about what we do, when for us it's just like a way of life. You know what I mean? So you have to have great discernment in who you involving yourself with and allow it to come into a space to talk to you and record you. Because I've seen it many a times, an Indian will go and have a conversation with a journalist, and then the journalist take it and put their own spin on it, and it makes it like what we saying is all mythical, when this is literally who we are. We trusted our teachers though. That's how we're able to still exist and last this long. And so, me personally, I'm very careful about who I deal with, so that way I can continue to lead my tribe and you know and make the elders proud. You know, I'm not being taken by the financial opportunities that may come about, but I'm just staying true to my culture and who I am, not letting the camera surprise me and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's what surprised me about today's art.
Thank you all for sharing that. Would anybody like to ask a question or have any comments? I know there was a lot going on, and I still have plenty of more ideas, so I'm gonna shut up.
Thank you so much for speaking. It's been very exciting to listen to everyone. I'm interested in if you've experienced a story or a visual art piece or an oral art piece or whatever that has moved you recently.
I have. It's a story I heard from my dad. I'm trying to ask more people in my family about specific memories they have and specific stories, because we didn't hear a lot of them growing up, and I really think it has to do with assimilation. The stories that I did get from my parents were few and far between, and I didn't think to ask them when I was younger, because that's not something I was like socialized to be curious about. But I am curious about those things now, despite that. So I asked my dad a few months ago about his earliest memory, or one of his earliest memories. My dad is, how old is my dad right now? How am I right now? What year are we in right now? That's a better question. My dad is 66 years old. This memory he told me about, it was from around the time that he was maybe like 5 years old. And it was just a really simple memory. He remembers in the village that he was living in at the time in Bangladesh, he was playing outside with his 2 brothers at a friend's house. And it was time for dinner. And the friend's family invited them in, and they sat down for dinner. And the family was having crab, so they put crab on the plate. This is significant because my dad, I'm Muslim, we grew up Muslim. Bangladesh is a country that at that time it wasn't even called Bangladesh actually at that time. At that time it was East Pakistan. That's a whole other dimension, tangent, won't get into that now. But Bangladesh has a big population of Muslims as well as Hindus, dwindling now unfortunately because of the vestiges of partition, which is again another part of history that y'all may or may not have heard about, local history. So there are Bengali Hindus, there are Bengali Muslims, and other like religious and faith traditions as well. But there is a big divide now, and a big narrative around that division between Bangladeshi Muslims, Bangladeshi Hindus, Bengali Muslims, Bengali Hindus. In Bangladesh, Hindus are oppressed. In India, Muslims are oppressed. But so that family that they were having dinner with was Hindu, or just not Muslim. And in Islam, there are certain foods that we don't consider them haram, but in certain traditions, there are certain foods that are considered like still not widely eaten, and crab is one of them. So my dad and his brothers, they were little, they were just kind of like, oh, like, we don't really, like, what is this actually? Like, we don't know. And eventually the family figured out and was like, oh, okay, let's give them something else to eat. And then my dad was telling me at that time also, like, there were Hindu festivals that would happen, there were Islamic celebrations that would happen, and like Hindus and Muslim Bengalis alike would go and celebrate those things. And he was reminiscing because he was saying that doesn't happen anymore. But it was something that was just so simple and just so communal. And to him, as like a 5-year-old child, without question, that was just normal. And we don't have that now in Bangladesh. So yeah, I really recommend asking y'all's elders, your parents, whoever you have in your family, what's one of their earliest memories? It's something I think about a lot for myself. I'm like, what are my earliest memories? I need to be better about thinking about these things. I'm gonna forget. I have no stories to tell anyone otherwise.
That is not true.
Thank you all so much. This was so deeply resonant on every level. Thank you all so much for sharing. Yes. I'm so moved by everything. Thank you.
I recently found out about this artist through TBD called Solomon Z, and they just put out this there's some music on YouTube. It's an album, I don't know what kind of album, but it's called Humiliation, and I really like it because it's just got me thinking a lot about shame and how we have all just been so socialized to be ashamed of being human beings. So I recommend both the magazine, but also you can just look up Solomon Z, and it's this like operatic, haunting, like you feel it more than you're listening to it. So I've been playing that EP, LP, whatever it's called, in the shower most of this week. So I highly recommend it.
You can go first. No, you go.
Okay, fine. Yeah, I think in terms of your question about art that we've seen that's made an impact on us lately is, I mean, we just closed our submissions for this upcoming issue, and I think I was telling folks that I've talked to recently about how, I don't know, I just feel so lucky because I felt as if we got so much different art and like different perspectives and different people from all different parts of the country and some from like different parts of the world. And there was this one piece that really stood out to me that will be in there. So I'm just gonna give a little bit, but I'm just gonna give a little bit and not tell everybody everything. Because they technically don't know that they've been selected yet. but they wrote this really beautiful piece about basically visiting a local jail that they had even seen created in their community, like built, you know, like put people like inside, etc. And then now one of their friends is currently inside. And so they've been visiting this jail and seeing like the way that the land has transformed, seeing like all of these different things. They just really describe the moments of like walking through like the parking lot, the long driveway, like walking up to the gate, being part of like noise demos where you can hear like people are just like, they're like, can we just go up to the jail? Like, yes, you can. And all of these different things, and it's a very visceral moment about really how just like the complex feelings that you get from the mundanity, is that even a word? Of it all, but then also just the gravity of how constant and continuous and like everyday incarceration is. And like being inside, being intimately familiar with this place that is so devoid of human dignity and like of just like all of the beauty that you see in the world, right? Like even looking outside of these windows, it's like there's so much color, there's so much light, there's so much movement. But when you visit a jail, if you've had that experience, which like I have, it's so still, clinical, dark, fluorescent. It's very sterile. And so to hear them kind of explain this whole situation about just like the everyday of people like sometimes even just using the sidewalk outside when they're like walking by to go on a walk or something, like older people, and people like letting their dogs like run around on the grass outside of the jail, and just feeling this really hard balance of like witnessing this monstrosity that is so obviously in all of our communities, and like being very intimate and familiar, and then also at the same time like still finding so much love in like in desire for the system to crumble, right? And to be, I don't know, just the enmeshment of it, just like the way that they were writing, the way that they really captured the feeling of being there. I mean, it broke me to pieces. It was one of the things I read that made me cry. And you know, while I'm like, I can be very like friendly and stuff, I feel like when I'm an editor, I can be kind of a little, you know, intense. Like I'm like, okay, I'm reading these things. I want to connect, but I also want to like, you know, read them a few times and be thorough and whatever. But upon the first read, this brought me to tears because it just really, I think those things are meant to be pushed to the back of our minds, right? Like things like prisons and jails are meant to be out of sight, out of mind. Things like AI and data centers, right? Things like weapons manufacturers, they're intentionally placed in these areas in which you are not able to access them easily, or they blend into the community in some way that is really nefarious and evil. But just like this person constantly witnessing it and constantly going in and seeing their friend and, you know, interacting with the guards when they tell them to like leave the gates and things, you know, like it's just this really powerful moment where it's like, and even still like these structures that seem so permanent and imposing are inevitably, they're so fragile and they're also so temporary. And like, there's just this moment of being like, this will not exist. There's just no way that this will exist. There's no way that this will continue to exist, and we have to make it so. And so I think that was just like a story. I feel so honored to be doing this work because I get to hear those types of stories. You know, I get to sit with people about that and like have conversations. And yeah, that really, reading that, that shit broke me. But it was really beautiful, and it did make a huge impact on me. And I literally, the day after I read it, I passed by the jail that we have. And I was like coming up against the back, and I was like, is that the jail? All the barbed wire and all the like intense, and it looks like an ugly, ugly castle. Yeah, so, you know?
And it's meant to be out of sight, out of mind, but then it's work like this, and it's the direct action that's making it, you know, pushing it in the forefront. Even the jail that's on I-10, like they have those murals. First it was advertisements. First it was advertisements for college, which I thought was fucking so crazy, out of mind. Yeah. And then when who was coming to town? I don't know. Somebody was coming. We were bringing the Super Bowl to town, and they made it all these beautiful murals. And it's just there's such a disconnect there where you wouldn't know it was if you're not, you know, you're
it's like a Disney green.
Yeah, and you're just like, what
crazy
on earth? Even the other day I was driving from here to Homa, and I passed by this sign, and it was for a correctional center, but it had a name attached to it, so it's named after somebody. And I was like, what an interesting legacy to have, to have this place named after you. Why would you want?
Like the Travis Hill School?
Yeah,
which is a jail for youth, but it's called the Travis Hill School?
Yeah, it's weird.
No, evil, truly, wild.
A moment that moved me recently, I had to say it was a moment with my father too, this past carnival. So my dad been participating in masking like over 30 years, consistently every year. And he's the chief of my tribe, but he this year he's been like you can see the wear and tear catching up on his body. He have a warrior spirit. He have a warrior attitude. So as we coming out carnival and headed to look for other tribes to meet and battle with, not far in a walk, he began to move slower, you know, and you can see, you know, the people, you know, going up to him and asking, Chief, you all right? He like, yeah, I'm good, as he smoked his Black and Mild and, you know, keep on going. But eventually, upon the walk, he wasn't able to go anymore. That was the first time I ever seen that happen with my father. And just, it moved me and let me know, like, you know, we all have our time. Mm-hmm. And in this tradition, it's passed on. So, and you can, my interaction with my tribe, it's a natural vibe that you can see the transition that happened and who's going to be the next chief, and you know how that's going to happen. But that moved me in a way, let me know, like, you know, you have to get even more serious. You know, it's going to be your turn soon. And yeah, so that was crazy. And then art that kind of moved me recently was Damon Malonson. He's a leader within the masculine tradition. And he do some hell of a bead work, very detailed, and he dedicate 12 hours a day just sitting at the table and beading. You know, sometimes it get very lonely at that table. You know, you dozing off as you sew, and you waking up, They continue sewing, you know, you may stand up and walk around, but, you know, beading is a very, very long process. But his art been moving me, and it's just inspiring. Yeah.
I guess for me, something that happened recently that has been interesting about art is that there was an indigenous uprising in my community, Otavalo, in the fall of last year. And during that time, people got together and they were, as I already mentioned, they were like painting murals and they were having concerts and they were like gathering together around the fire. And there was an area in one of the main highways that connects the capital city to the community and other cities that go along that. The name of the highway is Panamericana. And there's like a special, like kind of like a bridge that connects that, but one person was killed by the military there. And so they used that area as a way of resistance. So they painted with a lot of murals and they did like this massive mural on the highway because they shut everything. And then it was like a sanctuary for a lot of people, for a resistance since that happened. And the Ecuadorian government decided to go like maybe 2 days ago or 3 days ago, like very recently, and they painted all out. They like completely did it, and when the community found out about it, it was just like first I guess a sense of panic of like erasing so much of resistance and like the honor and the sanctuary that place became after the protests, and a lot of people passing, and there was like their faces painted all over, and so it was erasing all of that. And so that was very sad, but also the community got together. And I think this weekend they are having like a huge event again, where I think they are gonna repaint and they're gonna do music again, and they are like kind of showing that it doesn't matter as many times as the government wants to like erase our stories. Like people are gonna come back and we're gonna do it, and that's not gonna take away that. And just seeing like the way that people just reacted like fast, like we're not gonna let that happen, and our stories are important, and we're gonna do it. And they were gathering together, and just they were like communicating with muralists, with the ones that did it, and with the other artists, and everybody gathering together and being like, okay, we're gonna lift everything, we're gonna go again, we're gonna do it again, as many times as we need to do. It was very powerful to see that form of organizing through art after, because such a sacred place has been, it was like completely blanked out. So, yeah, I think that's what it just happens. I'm thinking about what it means also to have those spaces.
Thank you.
Well, we are at time, but feel free to mingle amongst yourselves. I would like a picture of the panel, so don't go anywhere. But thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. We have some more panels lined up throughout the day. The next one is at 1:05, which is also a lunch panel. Yeah, so feel free to stay around with us.
It's the business of books and bookings. So it has different published authors, venue owners, magazine editors who are here to tell us a little bit about that behind the scenes demystification.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you all so much.
It was so good.
Oh yes, we also